welcome to the show. I'm Antisocial. And this is the Antisocial Network.
I want to talk to her, but my face is up against the wall. Yeah, I think she wants to talk to me, but I'm antisociable. Yeah.
This week, I'm telling you part 2 of my horrendous healthcare scare. Thanks for tuning in. Hey guys, welcome back to my part 2 of the near-death episode. If you haven't listened to part 1, this probably isn't going to make any sense to you. Go back and listen to last week's episode and catch up first. When I left you all last week, I had just gotten done recounting as much of my medical crisis and what led up to it that I could remember. All you need to know is that in the following 2 years, I was shuffled around to every possible specialist and only ever gaslit and not listened to. I had heard countless times about how expensive our healthcare system is, but nothing was costing me a dime. Even my ambulance rides had been free. I guess you only have to pay for healthcare if you expect results. It started to become clear to me that I was merely being used as a vessel to bill my insurance for every single possible procedure under the sun. After waiting 3 hours past my appointment time in a urologist office, only to be seen for less than 3 minutes and told he would need to stick a camera up my urethra and that it was a standard procedure I shouldn't at all be concerned about, I threw a fucking tantrum and walked out, screaming the whole way. I'd been made to wait for hours to be told by a man within 30 seconds that he was going to stick a camera up my hoo-ha, and I was fucking incensed. I began to lose it. I was in a dark place. I started updating my dating profiles to say that you don't know true loneliness until you have no one to hold your hand at your MRI appointment. Even my parents were getting fed up with me. It was clear they didn't exactly believe anything was wrong with me. I was barely surviving and they were starting to harangue me to go back to work. One day, my father yelled at me, "If you're so sick all the time, why don't you go on disability?" and hung the phone up on me. While lamenting to one of my friends, he also got annoyed and said to me, "If there was something wrong with you, the doctors would have found it." If I wasn't already insane from the inaction and apathy of my doctors, this treatment by friends and family was sure making me crazy. My GP, who I had initially been excited about and who I had chosen specifically because she was a woman, went on maternity leave shortly after I started seeing her. When she came back, I was frustrated that she did not remember much of my medical history, what tests had been run, or why I was still coming in. Dismissively, she told me she had been away on maternity leave, affectionately bringing up her baby, like I fucking cared. I resented that she acted like I should coo over her newborn when she would not have used that as an excuse to a man for not knowing jack shit before coming into the exam room. The next time I needed to make an appointment and she was unavailable, I jumped at the chance to be seen by her father, who ran the practice. At this point, I was no longer fazed about seeing a man, since so many women physicians had completely failed me, and I took a shot. After explaining everything to him about my initial ER visit and thyroid labs, and the subsequent 1.5 years spent trying to get answers, he looked me straight in the eye, and I shit you not, floated the idea that maybe I was just a hypochondriac. I had gotten used to being discredited and gaslit by this point, but never had a doctor said to my actual face those actual words. I was irate, obviously, but also being used to having to advocate for myself in absolutely absurd and horrendous conditions by that point, I somehow mustered the ability to calmly tell him that I have a college degree with an emphasis in research and that, no, I don't think it's possible I'm just a hypochondriac. What was even more infuriating to me was that if this was true, which I knew that it was not, wasn't it his duty as a doctor to send me to a psychiatrist or something? If I'm a hypochondriac, that's still a problem with the body, and you should help me, not just call me crazy and send me off. Seeking validation, I went home and Googled, "My doctor called me a hypochondriac," and the first thing that came up was an article titled something about doctors who call their patients hypochondriacs are committing malpractice. After some time, all I had got was a giant folder of medical history and a diagnosis for irritable bowel syndrome. Twice I had been told that my ovarian cyst and fibroids were just normal problems a woman my age should get used to. During one of these series of appointments and follow-ups, I remember being on the phone in the parking garage of the hospital. I don't remember who I was calling and why, but I know it was somehow related to my medical care. And being the oversharer that I am, I'm sure I said something to the woman on the other end about my exasperation with my experience up until that point. Then, I guess moved by my words and feeling a connection, she told me a story. She said that a few years prior, she was diagnosed with a softball-sized tumor in her gut and was given a couple years to live. Terrified, she spent her entire life savings and racked up credit card debt traveling the world, intent on living out the last of her days experiencing it all. Then a funny thing happened, she told me. When she came back, the tumor had completely dissolved. It was gone. "Now I have a $50,000 credit card debt," she told me, "but I'm alive." She didn't have to tell me the moral of the story. I got what she was saying. She was telling me that these fucking asshole doctors might never know what's wrong with me, and they might never fix me either. She was offering me a kindness, the only advice she had. I don't remember who this person was. I think she was just a receptionist somewhere. But I sure remember that conversation standing in that parking garage. Before I tell you if I actually died or not, spoiler alert, I didn't, I'm going to jump to break. Do you like the majesty of a throbbing member? Are you willing but unable? Here at Pegasus Penises, we provide quality strap-ons for the Pegasus with unicorn dreams. Each strap-on is handcrafted and modeled after a real unicorn horn in order to deliver you a unique and enchanting experience. Choose from Mythic Sparklefart, My Little Puny, and Dinglehopper's Doppelganger for your pegging pleasure. That's Pegasus Penises for the hornless but horny. If you're bored with your cat's current litter, then you're in for a treat. While some cat litters change colors to inform you about your cat's health, Yummy Litter is the only cat litter that changes color to tell you when your cat's litter is safe to eat. This fail-proof method turns your cat's feces into delectable bite-sized treats pre-proportioned perfectly by your very own feline. All you need to do is wait for the litter surrounding your cat's most recent deposit to turn green. Wait 2 hours until it turns orange, then wait another 30 minutes until it has transitioned fully to purple. At this point, it is safe to eat, but only within the 2-hour window before it turns blue. If the poop turns blue, you have waited too long and you should not ingest. If blue poop is ingested after the 2-hour safety window, immediately drive to your nearest emergency room and seek the care of a professional. Yummy Litter! Fun for you and your family! And we're back. Diving right in. I finally decided that I was probably going to die if I continued this way. I literally just stopped returning doctor's calls and stopped going to my appointments. I took self-care so seriously it became my full-time job. I didn't give a fuck anymore if my parents harangued me about getting a job. They're not gonna let me go homeless, I told myself, and set to work relaxing 24/7 and only listening to my body. If I wanted to sleep, I'd sleep. If I wanted to take 3 baths a day, I'd take 3 baths. I spent money on art supplies and ate what I wanted. I hyper-focused on joy wherever I could find it. I bought crystals. I bought 5 different tarot decks. I started walking on the beach every day and got really into collecting sea glass. Then I started making jewelry out of the sea glass. Basically, I went back to doing whatever the fuck I wanted. And guess what? I slowly started feeling better. I began to feel like I had the power to heal myself. I started having whole days where my side didn't hurt and I didn't throw up. I could eat flour and sugar and dairy again without having inflammation for weeks on end. My skin cleared up. I stopped having to pee urgently several times a day. I was so grateful that at first I didn't even notice. I was so focused on being a chronically sick person that it took me a while to remember what it was like to feel well again. And then one day it hit me. I wasn't sick all the time. Instead of a wave of gratitude washing over me, I was frustrated all over again. Now I was certain I had not just been lazy or overweight the whole time, or whatever bullshit the doctors had been telling me for years, because now I felt better and I hadn't lost weight. I hadn't changed my diet. I hadn't increased my exercise routine. In fact, if anything, I'd gained weight and started caring way less about whether or not I was fat. Anyone who has ever said they'd rather be dead than fat has clearly never been close to death before. I was just so happy to not feel like I was dying all the time. I wasn't sleeping 16 hours a day anymore, and I didn't have debilitating inflammation and chronic pain. But I knew now more than ever that something had to be wrong with me, because I felt so markedly different and had spent enough time away from gaslighting doctors that it confirmed to me for sure that I was never imagining my goddamn symptoms. It had not all been in my head. I still know there's something wrong with me. I am not unique. I'm like thousands of women who have learned to manage their mystery symptoms because no one will take them seriously. Just last year, I had another bleeding episode that didn't seem like a period to me and scared me bad enough that I decided to go to urgent care before it got worse. Again, the doctor, another woman, assured me that I was likely just having a bad period and sent me for labs just to reassure me. And probably also because I paid the $100 out of pocket to go to an urgent care I liked instead of one of the shitty ones my network would pay for. I was sent for an ultrasound that revealed yet again I have an ovarian cyst and fibroids. After getting my blood labs, the doctor called me back and told me I was very vitamin D deficient. Normal levels were supposed to be around 24, and I was at 13. I took this news as no surprise since it had happened before, but the doctor actually sounded a little concerned. But God knows she never would have admitted to a patient that perhaps, maybe, she had downplayed my symptoms when I came in and had been wrong. I filled the prescription and then went home and Googled bleeding and vitamin D deficiency. And wouldn't you know it, the two are linked, stating new studies show that extreme vitamin D deficiency is connected to excessive uterine bleeding. How had my doctor not mentioned this? Probably because the asshole didn't know. If this entire experience has taught me anything, it's that information is accessible to everyone. The internet exists now, and this information isn't hidden behind a $100,000 paywall they call medical school. The truth is that no one was more invested in finding answers to my symptoms than me, and no one was or is a better authority on my experience than me. It's entirely possible and more likely probable that I have a condition that requires medical intervention, likely a thyroid regulator or perhaps even surgery. Knowing this causes me great pain and worry, and in fact at times it's terrifying. I am now properly frightened of doctors in a way that makes me consider far longer than I should if it's worth going to one when I'm in a state of medical crisis. In my experience, I'll get no help or relief, and I'd rather suffer through that alone at home on my bathroom floor where at least I won't be called a hypochondriac. This past week, my abdominal pain has returned, and I'm in the middle of some sort of episode yet again. When I came across 2 separate posts on Instagram that stopped me in my tracks, I felt called to write this episode, which turned into 2 episodes. I had intended to talk about how the healthcare system routinely discredits women, and more specifically Black women and women of color, and I wanted to highlight how this is not just a personal problem I've experienced. This is an epidemic. The first post was a comic drawn by Aubrey Hirsch and shared by @fuck__patriarchy. It outlined her own experience waiting years to be properly diagnosed with a thyroid dysfunction because she was young and appeared healthy. What struck me is that Aubrey's experience was almost exactly like mine, but totally different. She wasn't gaining weight, she was losing weight. And instead of being told that she constantly needed to work out or eat less, she was being given pamphlets on eating disorders every time she walked into a doctor's office. I broke into tears at the realization that had I been thin, I likely would have been treated just as badly by the doctors who were calling me fat. Here was a woman expressing nearly the same exact story of being dismissed and who had a debilitating chronic illness, only the doctors were just finding a different reason to shoo her out their door. Then I saw another post by @FatFabFeminist in which she explains how she had irregular periods for years and thought something was wrong, but doctors just kept telling her to lose weight. Eventually it was discovered she had a giant cyst on her left ovary, which had destroyed her ovary. She had to have surgery to remove both the cyst and the entire ovary. The rest of the post goes on to describe her sitting in the hospital wondering how things would have been different if doctors had just listened to her the first time. Sitting here now, after having strange bleeding 2 days this week and my period still hasn't come even though it's due, and knowing that it's also my left ovary that I have had a cyst on for years, I feel utterly helpless. I have advocated for myself to the best of my ability, cried in doctor's offices, yelled and walked out. I don't know what else to do. I don't have the money to sue them. I can't afford different insurance. Every time I change doctors or providers, it's just an endless stream of gaslighting and no diagnosis anyway. The one statistic I will leave you with is that autoimmune diseases like thyroid dysfunction and Hashimoto's take an average of 5 to 7 years for women to get diagnosed with. By the time I get any answers, I could have stage 4 cancer or be infertile. Who fucking knows? The doctors sure don't seem to. It's crazy this has turned into 2 full episodes when there is much that I have left out. If I were writing this for posterity's sake or to accurately document this for an attorney or doctor, this would be twice as long. I didn't even mention the intern who looked wild-eyed and completely overwhelmed when I went to see my GP for the first time, and who revealed to me as soon as we were alone in my exam room together that it was her first day on the internship and the doctor and nurses kept leaving her alone without any instructions. I never saw that intern again at my doctor's office after that day. I also didn't mention the extremely offensive and fat-phobic cartoon that equated eating too many candy bars with diabetes, which was printed out and displayed at eye level on the wall in front of the scale my doctor weighed me on. I never mentioned that after several attempts to get answers, my parents were willing to pay a specialist to see me and was turned away because I was told if I could pay for a doctor out of pocket that I was committing fraud. There's so much I didn't say. Really, this just served as a 16-page catharsis for me. I knew when I wrote this that it would be relatable for many listeners because unfortunately, not being taken seriously by our doctors is something too many women experience. Now that I'm at the end, I don't really know how to conclude this, mostly because this is an ongoing terror I still live with every day. For any person experiencing similar madness, I recommend the podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain by Nicole Sachs. Maybe in the future I'll do a more research-based episode on how this affects all women, but for now, you'll just have to live with my own personal horror story. I still can't believe it took me 2 episodes to get this out. Thanks for listening. That's my show for this week. I'm Antisocial, and this is the Antisocial Network. If you want even more access to me, Antisocial, follow me on Instagram at the Antisocial Network. To support my content creation dreams and to receive 2 bonus episodes a month, subscribe to my Patreon for only $5 at patreon.com/theantisocialnetwork. And for a limited time, new patrons will receive Antisocial Network stickers and a top secret handmade zine made by me, Antisocial. To send me voice memos or to submit your own funny fake ad that I might use in my podcast, download the Anchor app and find my show there. As always, new episodes are available in the free feed every week. See you next Wednesday. Later.
You might think I'm a nice guy, but I'm antisociable, yeah.